What if I told you one of the most important games of the last 20 years has no dialogue, no colour, and almost no story at all? And somehow it helped change the entire games industry. This is Limbo, a game widely considered as one of the most influential indie games of the modern era. In this video, we're looking at how its impact goes far beyond its gameplay and art style, and how it helped redefine how indie games were perceived, funded, and distributed. To understand why Limbo stood out, you have to remember what games looked like in 2010. The top-selling games for that year were Call of Duty Black Ops, Red Dead Redemption, Halo Reach, and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Big, loud games that were very eager to explain themselves, with every mechanic tutorialised, every story beat spelled out, and every objective marked on the map with a big, juicy icon. Limbo did the complete opposite. It just dropped you in. With no instructions or explanation, you learn how to play the game by dying. A lot. Honestly, Limbo might be the only game where getting impaled repeatedly is considered part of the tutorial. The mechanics of the game are incredibly simple. You can move left and right, you have a button for jump, and a button for interact, which is typically used for pushing things around and flipping switches. There's no weapons to pick up or items to collect. The world will constantly try to kill you in quite brutal ways, and learning how to survive is mostly a case of trial and error. But thankfully, the game's generous and instantaneous checkpoints ensure that your repeated dying doesn't become overly tedious. None of these mechanics are explained to the player. You simply start the game and figure it out as you go along. But this lack of explanation wasn't laziness, it was intentional design. Playdead, the development studio behind Limbo, trusted players to figure things out on their own. The game's lack of UI, text, or tutorials forced players to learn through experience. Without telling you directly, the puzzles taught you how the game's gravity, momentum, and timing worked. And instead of saying, press X to jump over this hole, it says, there's a hole full of spikes, good luck. This idea of learning through play, not instruction, became hugely influential. Limbo helped to popularise minimalist design and environmental storytelling. This design philosophy influenced many later indie titles and even AAA games, encouraging developers to trust players more and focus on immersive design rather than hand-holding. Limbo had proven something important. Players don't need to be told everything, they just need good game design. But then there's how Limbo looks. The colour scheme is black and white with some shadows. That's it. Flashy graphics and realism? No thank you. I like my games monochromatic and blurry. And somehow, it's easily one of the most instantly recognisable visual styles in all of gaming. Show a tiny corner of screenshot to anyone who's played Limbo, and they'll instantly know what game it's from.
£200 for you is yours if you can tell me what it is.
That is Limbo.
Limbo really stood out for its stark black and white visuals, minimal storytelling, and haunting atmosphere, which helped push the idea that video games could be art. However, Limbo wasn't trying to impress you with the art design, it was trying to make you feel the isolation, the tension, and the unease. And nothing did that more superbly than the game's most infamous enemy, the spider. Undoubtedly one of the most memorable enemies in all of gaming, this thing could turn Peter Parker into an arachnophobe. The game's sole animator stated she watched hours of real-life spider footage in order to accurately portray the creature's movement. This thing filled players with dread, and getting to finally overcome it and pull its legs off was pure relief. But here's the key thing. At no point did Limbo ever explain where we were or why we were dealing with a giant spider. The game didn't explain itself at all. Instead of relying on dialogue or exposition, it used environmental storytelling. And that ambiguity mattered, because it pushed games closer to something like films or literature, where meaning isn't always directly given to you, it's interpreted. Limbo has been included on several Best Video Game Ever lists, including Time magazine's, which indicates that Limbo transcended being a mere entertainment game and had become a significant title in the video game culture. It helped reinforce the idea that games could be more than just entertainment. They could be something you think about afterwards. A bit like me, thinking about it now, 16 years later. I should probably touch grass. But here's where things start to shift industry-wide. Before Limbo, indie games were often seen as small, niche projects that weren't particularly popular or profitable. There had been some breakout successes, such as Cave Story in 2004, and later Braid, Castle Crashers, and World of Goo in 2008. The world was waking up to the idea that indie games could be big successes, but it wasn't fully awake yet. Limbo changed that. When it launched on the Xbox Live Arcade, it was a huge success, selling over 300,000 copies in its first month, and going on to sell 1 million copies in its first year, which at the time, for a small independent studio, that was massive. And it sent a message to the industry. You don't need a huge team or a massive budget to make something that people care about. Shout out to anyone who's old enough to remember the Xbox Live Arcade launching, and if that's you, how's your golden retriever and how bad is your back pain? Limbo's tremendous sales success also helped validate something else: digital storefronts. Platforms like the Xbox Live Arcade and Steam suddenly looked a lot more viable for smaller indie developers. Limbo's success demonstrated that high-quality indie titles could thrive in the digital storefronts, enabling them to compete in the marketplace without the immense costs associated with producing physical copies of the game. Limbo was the proof of concept that developers didn't need the backing of a major publisher, they just needed a good game and a way to upload it. Its massive success helped pave the way for indie-friendly ecosystems like Steam and console marketplaces to actively promote smaller titles. Today, 99% of Steam's library is made up of indie games, and 48% of its revenue is generated through indie sales. Now, I'm not saying that Limbo was responsible for that directly, but it was one of the big early indie successes that helped generate more funding opportunities and visibility for independent developers worldwide. One of Limbo's early financiers was the Nordic Game Fund, a programme which awarded funding to video game projects from Nordic countries. Following Limbo's release, the programme saw a 50% increase in applications for funding, a record number of new developers now looking to take the risk on developing their games. Limbo's sales also indicated that customers were happy to pay a higher price for a decent indie game. At the time, most indies on the Xbox Live Arcade sold for a couple of dollars. So when Limbo entered the market at a price of $15, it caused some controversy among critics, who argued that a $15 price tag was way too high for a game that's only around 4 hours long. The conversation around Limbo's length to price ratio triggered a size doesn't matter movement among game developers, who pushed back against the idea of a game's value being tied to its length. I've been trying to convince my missus of something similar. Limbo didn't invent the indie game, but its financial success furthered the growing idea that there was a place in the market for high-quality, higher-priced indie titles. After Limbo, you started to see a wave of games that follow similar ideas. Atmosphere over exposition, emotion over spectacle, and design over hand-holding. From Software didn't create the action role-playing game, but they did put an entirely new spin on it, to the point that it spawned its own genre that we all know today as the Souls-like. I believe Limbo did the same. It didn't create the side-scrolling platformer, but it did influence a series of games that could be described as Limbo-Likes. Games such as Little Nightmares, Planet of Lana, Silt, Reanimal, and of course, Limbo's spiritual successor from the same developer, Inside. All of which emphasise mood, symbolism, and player-driven storytelling. I have videos on the channel about Inside and Reanimal. If you're enjoying this breakdown of Limbo, you might want to check those out next. I'll put links on the screen at the end of this video. So, did Limbo change gaming? Yes, but probably not on its own. But it certainly helped prove something at exactly the right time, that small teams could make meaningful, successful, and artistically respected games. It demonstrated that indie titles could have huge success on the digital storefronts. Limbo didn't just succeed, it helped to shift the industry's mindset. And once that idea took hold, the industry didn't really go back, which is what makes Limbo so important. Not only was it a fantastic game, but it showed the world what was possible, and arguably helped spark the indie boom that continues to this day. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please let me know in the comments, what important indie game do you think I should cover next? In the same year that Limbo released, 2010, we also had Super Meat Boy drop and Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Both highly influential indie games, both worthy of their own videos. I'm never going to touch grass again, am I?